My son said I look like a beggar. He laughed while his friends chuckled behind him, phones half raised like they might record it. The sound hit deeper than I expected, not because of the insult I'd heard worse in life, but because of who it came from. Jamal, my only son, the boy I once carried on my shoulders while building the company that pays for every piece of clothing he wears now. He stood there on my driveway, a designer hoodie draped over his shoulders, sneakers bright white under the afternoon sun. His skin, deep cocoa brown, glowed against the gold chain around his neck. He looked proud, confident, a man who thought money made him untouchable. I glanced down at myself. Old jeans, scuffed boots, a plain grey sweater, the kind of outfit that doesn't impress anyone, but it's the one that's seen the rise and fall of everything I built. I smiled instead of answering him. Not a sarcastic smile, a tired, knowing one, because Jamal had no idea who I really was to him anymore. He thought I'd retired broke. He thought I'd handed everything over years ago. He didn't know I still owned the controlling shares, that every check that cleared his account came through a company registered in my name. His friends elbowed each other, whispering, "Man, that your dad?" And he said, grinning, "Yeah, but don't worry, he doesn't bite. He's harmless." Harmless. That word stung worse than the laugh, because once upon a time, he was the boy who'd run to me after school, holding my hand, asking if I was tired. Now he just saw a man who didn't fit his world anymore. A man who dressed simply, a man who reminded him of humility he'd long forgotten. I turned away, letting their laughter fade behind me. The evening breeze carried the smell of wet asphalt and fried food from a nearby stand. It reminded me of the years when I built everything from scratch, when I worked double shifts just to buy him his first bike. As I reached the gate, I heard him call out again, "Hey, Pops, maybe ask for a raise at your janitor job." The boys exploded in laughter. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because the next morning, that laughter would echo in a very different way. That night I sat by the window of my small study. The house was quiet, too quiet for a man who once lived surrounded by the hum of meetings and success. I pulled out my laptop, opened the old corporate email, and there it was. His name, Jamal Bryant, listed under a recent promotion request. He had no idea the email landed directly in my inbox. No idea the name C. Bryant Holdings still meant me. No idea that the old man he mocked still signed every paycheck he bragged about to his friends. I read his message carefully, words full of arrogance. "I've increased client accounts by 30%. I deserve a bonus. My work speaks for itself." And beneath it, a digital signature that made my hands shake. Not with anger, but with disbelief at how far he'd drifted. I closed the laptop, leaning back, the leather chair creaking under me. Somewhere between raising him and building my empire, I'd failed to teach him what mattered most: respect. So I made a quiet decision that night. No shouting, no confrontation, just a simple email and one signature. I opened the payroll access panel, hovered over his name and adjusted one number. Just one. The next day his laughter would stop, and for the first time in years he would finally learn who the beggar really was. The next morning I woke before sunrise. The light crept through the blinds, painting lines across the wooden floor, and for a moment I just sat there, staring at my hands. The same hands that built everything, and now the same hands that were about to teach a lesson I never wanted to teach my own blood. I brewed my coffee slowly, the rich aroma filling the kitchen. That smell used to mean home. It used to mean family breakfasts, laughter, music, and Jamal sitting across the table, asking me to help him tie his tie for school. Now it was just me, the coffee, and a silence too heavy to drink through. The phone buzzed on the counter. It was a corporate message. Payroll updates were live. I knew what it meant. The changes I'd made last night were now in motion. I took a slow sip, watching the morning light shift from gold to white. Outside, the neighborhood started to wake up. Cars rolling by, dogs barking, kids waiting for buses. And somewhere across the city, my son was probably sitting in his glass-walled office, smiling, confident, ready to check his account balance before brunch. He thought he had it all figured out. He thought the old man had nothing left. But the thing about pride, it blinds you to the hands that made your world possible. I drove into the city around 8. Same route I used to take when I ran that company every day. Same coffee shop on the corner. Same security guard who still called me Mr. Bryant, with a polite nod that reminded me some people never forget respect. When I stepped out of the elevator, the front desk receptionist looked surprised. "Mr. Bryant, you haven't been here in months," I smiled. "Just checking in. Thought I'd say hello to the team." The office had changed. New decor, new faces. But the smell of ambition was the same. Money has a scent. It's like metal and coffee and arrogance all mixed together. Through the glass wall I saw him, Jamal, my son, laughing at something on his phone, surrounded by co-workers who looked up to him. He was sharp, confident, moving his hands as he spoke like he owned the room. And yet, the very foundation beneath his feet belonged to me. He looked up, caught sight of me through the glass, and froze for a split second. Then he smiled. That same shallow, performative smile, the one that doesn't reach the eyes. He walked out, hands in pockets, voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Hey, Pops, what brings you downtown? Lose your way to the bus stop?" His co-workers chuckled nervously, not sure if they should laugh or stay silent. I looked at him, not with anger, but with the quiet sadness only a father can feel when he realizes his child mistakes kindness for weakness. I answered softly, "Just thought I'd see how the company's doing under your leadership." He smirked. "It's doing just fine. Maybe I'll give you a tour if you're not too busy sweeping parking lots." I chuckled, slow and calm. "I'll take that tour another time. I'm just here for a quick meeting." He nodded and turned, but I caught the faintest flicker in his eyes, a glint of discomfort. Somewhere deep down, he still knew I wasn't just another old man. By the time I reached the top floor, I could already hear the murmurs. Something was off. The HR director looked panicked, whispering into a phone. A few managers were standing by the door, whispering. And there it was, he was the first domino falling. "Sir," one of them said as I passed, "some of the checks didn't clear this morning. We're trying to confirm why." I didn't stop walking, didn't smile, didn't say a word. But deep inside, a storm of memories hit me all at once. The years I spent making sure my employees never missed a payment. The nights I worked through fever, just to keep the business alive. And the day I handed the reins to my son, because I thought he'd lead with heart, he didn't. He led with ego. He spent, showed off, mocked the ones who came before him. Now that arrogance was about to crumble. Not because I wanted revenge, but because every lesson I'd ever tried to teach him had been ignored. And sometimes life forces people to learn the hard way. Back downstairs I saw him again. This time the confidence was fading. He was on his phone, his voice rising. "No, that's not possible. Check again, it's not my account." I stood by the elevator watching quietly. His friend, the same one who laughed with him a few nights ago, looked away awkwardly as Jamal's voice cracked with panic. I turned and stepped into the elevator, my reflection merging with the metallic doors. The doors closed with a soft ding. That sound, that quiet, simple sound, and felt like the end of an era. And as I descended, I realized this wasn't punishment. It was clarity. My son had to lose what he worshipped to finally see what mattered. Respect. Something money could never buy, and something no beggar could ever lose. That evening, I sat on my porch as the sun melted into the horizon. The air was still carrying the faint hum of crickets and the smell of cut grass. It was peaceful, too peaceful for the chaos I knew was unfolding downtown. My phone buzzed. 3 missed calls, all from Jamal. I didn't answer. A long time ago, he'd call me to talk about basketball scores, to ask for advice, to share a laugh over dinner. Now he only called when he needed something. I set the phone down beside my coffee cup and listened to the wind. I wanted to feel guilty, but I didn't. This wasn't cruelty. This was correction. Because sometimes the only way to teach someone humility is to let them face the mirror they've been avoiding. At 9:07 p.m., he called again. This time I answered, "Dad." His voice cracked through the receiver, fast, anxious. "Something's wrong with payroll. My check bounced. HR says it came from the top, and they can't explain it." I stayed silent for a few seconds, letting his words hang in the air. "Maybe there was a mistake," I said quietly. He scoffed, frustrated. "A mistake? This is humiliating, Dad. My co-workers found out. They're saying I must have done something wrong. Do you know how that looks?" I sipped my coffee, calm. "How does it look, son?" He went quiet. The silence on the line was heavy, like the weight of realization pressing through every word. Then his voice lowered. "Dad, "Do you know something about this?" I didn't lie. I didn't confirm it either. I just said, "Maybe it's time you remember who helped build the company you brag about." He inhaled sharply. "Wait, are you saying—" But I'd already ended the call. For a long time after, I just sat there staring at the sky. The clouds moved slow, the moon rising like a quiet witness. Somewhere a car drove past, its headlights flashing across the fence. And I thought about the man my son had become, loud, confident, untouchable. He thought success was permanent. He thought titles couldn't vanish. But I'd seen empires crumble from pride before. Even my own almost did, back when I forgot what truly mattered. The next morning the calls came earlier. 6 missed, then 10. Then texts. "Dad, please pick up." I didn't mean what I said. "I just need to fix this. People are talking." By noon there was a knock on my door. I knew that knock. The kind that isn't confident anymore. The kind that trembles between shame and desperation. When I opened the door, Jamal stood there, eyes tired, clothes wrinkled. A shadow of the man who mocked me days ago. He didn't look like the executive he once flaunted. He looked like a boy again, lost, small, searching for direction. He spoke softly. "Dad, I don't understand. Everyone's turning on me. Even my friends. They said I've been cut off from the system. The company's freezing my accounts." I nodded slowly. "Sometimes," I said, "life freezes what arrogance overheats." He blinked, confused, then angry. "So this is about respect?" "About what I said." "Come on, Dad, you're taking this too far." I stepped outside, standing under the morning light. It hit his face. The same cocoa skin that once glowed with pride, now pale with fear. "I gave you everything," I said calmly. "Education, a name, a foundation, and all I ever asked for in return was respect." He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "Dad, please." "I didn't mean it, but you did," I said softly. "And that's the problem. You meant it enough to laugh, enough to let your friends join in, enough to forget who made you who you are." He looked down, jaw trembling. For the first time I saw it. The collapse not of his career, but of his pride. And in that moment, I felt something shift in me too. Not anger, not satisfaction. Just sorrow, because a father never wins when his child falls. Even when it's deserved, he whispered, "Dad, what do I do now?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not a failure but a chance. A chance to rebuild him from the ground up, the right way this time. "Start by listening," I said quietly. "And maybe by apologizing to the man you forgot I was." He nodded slowly, tears clinging to his lashes. That was the moment the wall between us started to crack, not completely, but just enough for truth to slip through. As he turned to leave, I said one more thing. "Son, remember this, and every time you look down on someone, you risk missing the hands that once lifted you up." He froze at the door, eyes wet, but didn't say another word. He just left, shoulders heavy, heart heavier. I watched him go, the silence returning again. But this time it didn't feel empty. It felt like change, and deep down I knew this wasn't the end of his lesson. It was only the beginning. The next few days moved like slow fire. Jamal's life, once a parade of confidence that began to dissolve piece by piece. The same friends who used to laugh beside him now laughed about him. The same co-workers who clung to his side at meetings now crossed the hallway to avoid eye contact. Word had spread faster than smoke in dry wind. Jamal's check had bounced and no one knew why. He tried to explain. He said there was a mistake. He blamed HR, finance, the system. Anything that could hide the truth he didn't want to face. That the power he'd been flexing never really belonged to him. The company that fed his ego. The salary that bought his clothes, the authority that made people listen. It was all under my name. Every signature that mattered carried my pen stroke. And now that I'd paused it, the world he built on borrowed pride began to crumble. I sat in my small study that afternoon, papers spread across the desk. Old contracts, ownership records, payroll authorizations, all with my name. Malcolm Price, founder and silent chairman. When Jamal joined the company 2 years ago, I let him believe he earned it all on his own. He was brilliant, sure, but he was also impatient, proud, and blind to the hands that steadied him. He wanted success without gratitude and fame without foundation. That's what broke him. Not the system, not me. His forgetfulness. The phone rang again. It was my assistant, Jordan, a loyal woman who'd been with me since the company's birth. Her voice was calm, professional as always. Mr. Price, your son's been trying to reach the board directly. He's emotional. Should I continue to hold his access? I exhaled slowly. Yes, don't block him, but don't rush to help him either. Let him find humility before he finds answers. She hesitated. You sure, sir? He sounds desperate, I smiled faintly. Desperation is the only teacher pride can't ignore. That night I went for a walk through the city streets. The world had changed since I was his age. Louder, faster, colder. Neon lights glared off wet pavement, and I could hear laughter spilling out from the same bars his friends frequented. I passed by one of them, the Redwood Lounge, the spot where Jamal had once mocked me in front of his friends. Back then I had been wearing my worn jacket and scuffed shoes. He'd called me a beggar right there, his friends chuckling behind him. He never knew half those boys were drinking on my company's tab. Tonight the same boy sat there again, but the laughter was different, sharper, crueler, and pointed in a new direction. Through the window, I saw Jamal sitting alone at a corner table. His once perfect fade was now messy, his tie loose, his face tired. A man who had tasted status and now choked on humility. I stood outside in the drizzle, unseen, watching as one of his so-called friends, Malik, slapped him on the shoulder. Man, I told you not to mess with the wrong people, Malik said loud enough for the others to hear. You talk big, you fall big. The group laughed. Jamal tried to smile, but his eyes were glassy. He lifted his drink, his hand trembling just slightly, and muttered something I couldn't hear. Then he stood up abruptly, tossing a few bills on the table and storming out. He brushed right past me without noticing. Head down, phone in hand, anger boiling behind his eyes. I watched him go, the rain catching in the faint stubble on his face. For a second I wanted to stop him, to pull him close, tell him I was proud of the man he could still become. But I didn't, because sometimes a father's silence speaks louder than comfort ever could. The next morning I got a message from HR. Jamal had resigned. The email was short, rushed, defensive. I can't work for people who don't value me. I'll find my own path. No signature, no formality. Just ego dressed as independence. But fate, as it often does, had its own plans. By that evening, every major firm in town had already heard about his bounced paycheck and his public meltdown. No one wanted to hire a man whose own father owned the company that fired him, or worse, froze him. The calls started again. This time they weren't angry. They were quiet, tired, soft. Dad, can we talk? Dad, I need some advice. Dad, please. I didn't answer any of them. Not yet, because I wanted him to sit with his silence the same way I had sat with mine that night. He humiliated me. To understand how loud regret can sound when there's no one left to listen. On the 5th day, I finally called him back. His voice cracked as he picked up. Dad, I messed up. I said nothing. He continued, I thought I was untouchable. I thought people respected me for me. But now I see, they only respected my money. Your money. I let him finish, then said, Son, wealth doesn't define a man, but respect does. You lost both the moment you forgot that. He sobbed quietly on the other end. It broke me a little inside hearing the boy I raised cry like that. Can I come home, Dad? He whispered. I closed my eyes. Not yet, Jamal. Not until you remember the value of the name you carry. He didn't argue. He just said, Yes, sir. It had been years since I'd heard that tone, the one that came not from fear, but from understanding. As I hung up, the sun began to rise outside, painting gold over the city skyline. I knew he was finally learning. Not through lectures, not through punishment, but through the quiet echo of consequence. And somewhere in that silence I whispered a small prayer, not for revenge but for redemption, because a father doesn't truly want his son to suffer. He just wants him to see clearly, and now for the first time in years, Jamal finally could. The next morning the air felt heavy, thick with the weight of things unsaid. For years I'd built walls around my heart, brick by brick, thinking they'd protect me from pain. But hearing my son's voice crack on the phone last night, those walls started to crumble. I sat on the porch, the same old wooden steps where I used to watch Jamal play basketball when he was 10. Back then, he'd always look back at me, seeking approval after every shot. Now all I could see in my mind was that same boy trapped inside a man who had lost his way. A car pulled up quietly in front of the house. An old beaten sedan, not the shiny BMW he used to flaunt. The door opened, and Jamal stepped out slowly. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in spirit. His suit jacket hung loose, the edges wrinkled. His shoes, once polished to mirror shine, were scuffed and wet from the morning dew. His eyes were red, sleepless, and for the first time in years he looked human again. He stood at the gate, hesitant. I didn't move, didn't speak. He stared at the porch like it was sacred ground. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice trembling. I nodded once. He opened the gate, his movements careful, deliberate, like he was walking into a church. The crunch of gravel beneath his shoes was the only sound between us. When he reached the steps, he stopped. He didn't sit. He didn't dare. "I've been thinking a lot," he began, his eyes fixed on the porch floor. "I thought being successful meant being above people. I thought money was power, but it's just a cage, isn't it?" I stayed silent, watching him fumble with his hands. He looked down at his fingers, the nails chipped, a small blister on his thumb, a sign he'd been working maybe for the first time in years. "I got a part-time job at a garage," he said quietly. "Cleaning cars. It's not much, but I wanted to earn something that didn't come from your name." A small smile tugged at the corner of my lips. Not of amusement, but of relief. "That's good," I finally said. "Work has a way of reminding us who we are." He nodded slowly, a tear slipping down his cheek. "I was so stupid, Dad. I let people fill my head with pride. I laughed at you, the man who built everything I took for granted." He took a deep breath. "When I saw my paycheck bounce, I didn't even feel angry. I just felt empty, like I deserved it." His honesty cut deeper than any insult ever could. I stood up, my knees aching as I did, and walked down the steps toward him. When I reached him, I placed my hand on his shoulder. He flinched, maybe expecting anger. But I pulled him closer instead. For a moment we just stood there, father and son, silent, the morning sun warming our skin. No words, no excuses, just understanding. After a while I said softly, "You can't undo what's been done, but you can learn from it. Pride destroys faster than time, son. But humility, that rebuilds." He nodded, his face buried in his hands. "I want to make it right. I don't care if it takes years. I'll start from the bottom if I have to." I looked into his eyes, the same deep brown as his mother's, and for the first time I saw truth there. No arrogance, no mask, just the man I had hoped he'd become. "I'll give you a chance," I said finally. "But this time you work for it. No shortcuts, no favors. You start at the lowest position. You'll report to the same people you once disrespected." He looked surprised, but then nodded firmly. "Yes, sir." I could tell he meant it. A week later, I arranged for him to rejoin the company, not as a manager, not even in corporate. He started as a field assistant, part of the operations crew, cleaning warehouses, checking shipments, taking orders. The same kind of work I did when I built that empire from scratch. At first, I stayed away. I didn't visit, didn't call, didn't ask for updates. I wanted him to find his footing without my shadow looming over him. But the reports started coming in. Jamal was different. He was punctual, respectful, quiet. He stayed late, helped others, and even apologized to some of the men he once mocked. One afternoon, my assistant brought me a file. It was Jamal's weekly evaluation. At the top, in neat handwriting, someone had written, "He's not his father's son anymore. He's his own man." I sat back in my chair, a lump forming in my throat. That night I called him. "Son," I said, "how's the work?" He chuckled softly. "It's hard, but it feels good. I sleep better now. I don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore." There was a pause. Then he added, "Thank you, Dad, for teaching me, even when I didn't want to learn." After we hung up, I stared at the city lights through my office window. The same skyline that once felt cold now looked alive. Because somewhere out there my son was finally standing on his own. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt proud. Not of the company, not of the money, but of the man my son was becoming. The world can take everything from you, your house, your fortune, your dignity, but it can never take the lesson that pain teaches. And in that moment, I realized, maybe that was the real inheritance all along. It had been 6 months since Jamal started at the bottom. 6 months since the day he traded expensive cologne for the smell of grease and dust. 6 months since the man who once called me a beggar learned what real wealth meant. I watched him from afar, quietly, through reports, messages, and whispers that traveled through the company halls. They said he worked harder than anyone else. That he never complained. That he carried himself with quiet respect. Never arrogance. But one thing no one could see was how much he had changed inside. I could. I felt it every time I heard his voice, and steadier, softer, honest. The pride that once blinded him was now tempered into humility, and that humility, it looked good on him. One Friday evening, as the sun set over the skyline, I got a call from Jordan, my assistant. "Sir," she said, "there's a young man at the front desk. Says he won't leave until he sees you." I smiled, already knowing who it was. "Send him in." When Jamal walked through the office door, I almost didn't recognize him. He wasn't wearing a suit. Just a clean work shirt and jeans, his hands still stained with the faint marks of labor. He stood taller, not because of pride, but because of purpose. "Dad," he said softly. I nodded, motioning to the chair across from me. He sat down, his posture straight, his gaze steady. There was a silence between us. Not awkward, but meaningful, like two souls finding peace after a storm. "I've learned something these last few months," he said finally. "That the respect people give you doesn't come from fear or titles. It comes from what you give back. From the way you treat them when you have nothing to gain." He took a slow breath. "I used to think you were weak for being quiet, for staying humble. But now I understand. It's harder to be silent than to shout. It takes strength to walk away from pride." I felt my throat tighten. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded check. The same kind of paycheck that had once bounced. But this time it was signed by him. "I got promoted," he said, smiling faintly. "Supervisor. It's not much, but it's something I earned." He slid the check across the desk toward me. "For you." I looked down at it. He had endorsed it to my name. The amount was modest, but the gesture was priceless. "I don't need your money, son," I said quietly. "I know," he replied. "But I wanted to show you that I understand now. You gave me everything, and I repaid you with disrespect. This isn't repayment. It's acknowledgement." For a long time I said nothing. I just looked at him, the man he had finally become. Then I stood and walked around the desk. He rose to his feet, unsure what I'd do next. I pulled him into my arms. This time he didn't pull away. He held on tight, his shoulders shaking. I whispered, "I never stopped believing in you. Jamal, I just needed you to see yourself the way I saw you, capable of more than your ego allowed." He nodded against my shoulder, tears slipping down his face. "I see it now, Dad. I finally see it." We stood there in silence, and father and son, two men bound by blood and lessons learned the hard way. And in that moment every wound healed, every scar softened. When we finally let go, I reached into my drawer and took out an envelope. I handed it to him. "What's this?" he asked. "Open it." He tore it open carefully, his eyes scanning the first page. His lips parted in shock. "Dad, this is—" "Yes," I interrupted softly. "Half of the company?" "It's yours now," he froze. "I don't deserve this." "No," I said. "You don't. Not for what you did back then. But you do deserve it for what you've become now." He stared at the paper, then at me, his eyes glistening. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't," I replied. "Just keep doing what you're doing. Lead with respect, not pride. Be the man your workers can trust." He nodded slowly, gripping the envelope like it was made of glass. And for the first time in my life, I saw him truly see me. Not as a poor old man, not as a servant, not as someone beneath him, but as a father who never stopped loving him. As he turned to leave, he paused by the door. "Dad?" "Yes, son." "Do you still wear that old jacket?" I chuckled. "Every winter," he smiled faintly. "Don't ever throw it away. That jacket taught me more than any degree or paycheck ever could." After he left, I sat alone in the quiet of my office. The city lights flickered outside, reflections dancing on the window pane, and for the first time in years my heart felt light. I leaned back, looking up at the ceiling, whispering softly to myself, maybe the richest thing a man can leave behind isn't money or property, but wisdom that outlives him. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. Jordan peeked in. "Sir, everything okay?" I smiled. "Yes, Jordan. Everything's finally okay." That night, as I drove home through the same streets where my son once mocked me, I saw him walking with two of his old friends, the same ones who used to laugh at me. But this time it was different. He wasn't showing off. He was listening, helping one of them carry a heavy bag, laughing genuinely, the kind of laugh that comes from peace, not arrogance. I stopped the car quietly at the curb, watching him from a distance. For a brief moment his eyes met mine. He smiled, not out of pity or guilt but gratitude. I nodded back, then drove away slowly, my chest warm, and in that quiet drive home, I thought about everything we'd been through. How words can wound deeper than knives, how silence can teach louder than punishment, and how love, patient, unspoken love, can rebuild even what pride destroys. When I reached home, I took off my old jacket, folded it neatly, and placed it on the chair by the window. Outside, the night breeze whispered through the trees, and as I sat there, I realized maybe the world had seen an old man who looked like a beggar. But tonight I felt richer than any man alive, because I didn't just regain a son. I witnessed his rebirth, and that was worth more than all the zeros in my account.